Working with resistance, the cycle of change and motivational interviewing. To quote the old song, if people are going to change and not resist change, then they need to be ready, willing and able. People won't change in your time, they will change in their time. They have to be prepared for it and willing to engage in it. They also may need support to be able to change. Frederick Hayes, a US bureaucrat, said, "There is no way to make people like change. You can only make them feel less threatened by it." I first came across the cycle of change model when I read Changing for Good by Prochaska, Norcross and de Clement as a student. And what struck me when rereading it later was how applicable it is to almost all social work situations. The people we engage with as social workers are often in a position of either going through a change, often associated with a loss, or needing to facilitate a change to improve their current position. The book lays out 6 stages. The first is pre-contemplation, where the person may not even be aware of the possibility or the need for change, or may be actively resisting it. The person may feel that things are fine and they don't see a problem. In their book Scarcity, Mullainathan and Schaffer talk about how the impact of things like poverty, maybe financial poverty or poverty of social capital, mean people don't have the mental bandwidth to even think about changing, as they are so focused on simply getting through the next moment. All of their psychological energy, their bandwidth, is employed doing that. The second stage sees people having a desire to change, but possibly still being resistant to it. When in contemplation, people are thinking of changing, but maybe worrying about the impact or how the change might affect others. At this point, it can be helpful not to contemplate too big a change. Maybe try thinking about small changes. Whether or not you want to do anything may change from day to day, and in this stage, we are at a good point to use some skills and techniques like motivational interviewing, which we'll come to in a while. Preparation is the getting ready phase and sets out to consider the specific steps that will be required to facilitate the change. Sometimes jumping to preparation and even then action can be unhelpful if the person isn't ready to do so. In early iterations of the model, the preparation and action stage were sometimes grouped together and do sometimes on a practical level go hand in hand. As someone contemplates the change, they will think about how to go about it and may be keen to get on with it. It can also, though, be a time of difficult choices and anxiety about what the change may bring about. We love familiarity as human beings, even when what is familiar may not be the best for us. It's comfortable, it's easy. This is where, as social workers, you can have a valuable role in helping people think things through. It could be useful not to jump too quickly to preparation and action, but rather hold the person in contemplation in order to build resilience when preparing to start to make change. You may want them to think about what could go wrong, ponder, have they tried this before, how did it go, what could I do differently? Then comes action and maintenance. At the action stage, the person may need support, encouragement and help to develop a sense of perspective. It can be an emotionally fragile time. People need the safe space that you have hopefully created to return to during the action stage, to check in about how things are going. Particularly important if things aren't going well, but equally serves as an opportunity to celebrate achievement. Why do people sometimes fail to make the change? Well, all too often, when supporting people, we help them set up a goal from our perspective. In doing so, we set up an external motivator, not an internal one. Sometimes we are duty bound to set up a goal from our perspective as we are agents of an organisation. Things like adequate parenting are defined for us, and we ask people to change to meet those goals. And in some ways, there's no getting away from that, as children need to be safe. Sometimes we fall into the trap of giving more weight to the views of parents of adults with a learning disability, when I suspect the person themselves may well set themselves more aspirational goals. Older people are also going through change, but often family members and health professionals dictate the nature and pace of change responses to events. The key is to work with people to set their own goals. We may need to provide people with skills so that they feel confident that they can facilitate change. If people are confident, they are less likely to procrastinate. When we are involved with people in the contemplation and preparation stages of the cycle of change, we need them to set their own internal goals, not to have them acquire goals external to them. We also need to support them to acquire the skills required to facilitate the change. I accept that this can be difficult where safeguarding, for example, requires a speedy response. That is the reality of that arena. But if people are to facilitate real change in their lives, they need to motivate themselves internally and not be motivated by external carrots and sticks. Once we've started the change needs to be maintained in order to avoid relapse. So we get to maintenance. The person may benefit from identifying things that may go wrong so that strategies can be put in place. Finally, we get to lapse and relapse. This is common. A lapse is a short-term setback that can be more easily recovered from. A relapse has long-term repercussions and may require a complete reset. The following clues often indicate a potential lapse or relapse. Maybe experiencing negative mood states, boredom, depression, anxiety, anger, and social situations can be difficult when making some changes. So as we identified in the maintenance stage, planned strategies for coping with a lapse or relapse may be beneficial. Relapse need not be a negative event, as most people who maintain their goal have relapsed several times on their way. Motivational interviewing is an effective, evidence-based approach to overcoming the ambivalence which stops people making desired changes in their lives. That's from Miller and Rolnick's classic 1991 text, Motivational Interviewing, Preparing People for Change. It can be used in conjunction with the stages we've just described. Motivational interviewing was developed in response to working with clients' resistance in alcohol treatment in the late 1980s. It works in relatively brief interventions and is a more helpful stance in working with high levels of resistance in clients than a confrontational or coercive style. Motivational interviewing builds on Carl Rogers' optimistic and humanistic theories. We all have the capacity to change to become the best version of ourselves. We just need to figure out how. It's about people's capabilities for exercising free choice and changing through a process of self-actualization. Essentially, motivational interviewing activates the capability for beneficial change that everyone possesses. Although some people can continue to change on their own, others require more formal support over the long journey of transformation. This resonates with ideas about how self is constructed. The more someone feels in control, the better. The self is the humanistic term for who we really are as a person. The self is our inner personality. The self is influenced by the experiences a person has in their life and our interpretations of those experiences. According to Rogers, we want to feel, experience and behave in ways which are consistent with our self-image and which reflect what we would like to be like, our ideal self. The closer our self-image and ideal self are to each other, the more consistent or congruent we are and the higher our sense of self-worth. Central to motivational interviewing is the idea of developing discrepancies. This originated from cognitive dissonance theory, which describes an imbalance between the internal and the external values of the individual. This causes a person to feel unbalanced. So where there is incongruence between what a person feels and does, there is a dissonance, a feeling of not being true to oneself. This being out of kilter motivates change to be more balanced and more congruent. Indeed, Miller and Rolnick say developing discrepancies is the active ingredient underlying motivational interviewing's efficacy. So, what are we trying to do within this motivational interviewing framework? We're trying to acknowledge and work with client resistance and encourage positive engagement. We are trying to be collaborative, taking a blend of different therapeutic approaches like person-centered, solution-focused and cognitive behavioral ideas to establish a process model of change. We have a belief in the possibility of change, respect for individuals, and we seek to empower, things that are core to the social work role. We are seeking to develop discrepancies in the client's behaviour. You're saying this, but doing this. You say you want life to be like this, but you do this. By pointing out discrepancies, you create a gap between where the person has been or currently is and where they want to be. The individual can come to a realization that their current behaviour is not leading them towards their goals, and they become more motivated and open to change. The goal is to resolve that discrepancy by changing. Using this technique, we are not seeking to persuade, but rather point out. It's tempting to try to be helpful by persuading. You might be tempted to draw their attention to the importance or urgency of the problem being addressed, or put to them the benefits of changing a behaviour. These strategies are likely to backfire because you are trying to motivate them extrinsically from your position, not intrinsically from their self. It usually only increases client resistance and decreases the probability of change. So strategies to use: express empathy, show you understand as far as you ever can. Be non-judgmental, make sure that the client is being heard and understood. Develop that discrepancy. Help the client see the difference between their core values and their behaviour. Create gap between where the client is and where she wants to be. Define the most important goals. Trying to achieve too many things at once can be overwhelming. Make sure the goal is the person's and not yours. Support self-efficacy. The person has to believe in their ability to change. This is reminiscent of the strengths-based approach in social work. It could be good to focus on such skills and strengths and on past successes because this promotes self-esteem and builds confidence. The goal is to move the client to what is referred to as change talk rather than sustain talk. They are talking about changing to a new position rather than sustaining the one they are currently in. So we're offering an open position to engage a client without offering a direct challenge or creating a power struggle. The minute a person starts to feel that they are being told what to do is when they start to offer resistance. You should seek to understand and ask for explanations as to why a person feels the way that they do, and using skills to empower the client and explore what change might look like. And maybe make sure that the person understands that it may be a bumpy ride. If at first you don't succeed, find another way and try again.